Hi, everybody. I thought I would just make a quick video for you as you begin working on your midterm exam. You were able to access it this morning at 12 a.m. I just thought I'd do a quick video to sort of talk a little bit about the expectations for the exam and to go over the questions. Okay, so as you know, this exam is an essay style exam. There are 6 questions that are on the exam, and you choose 4 to work on. It's open book, open notes. It's not timed like a normal quiz. You received the test today, and it is due on Sunday, March 20th at 11:59 p.m. And so the test itself is worth 140 points, which is 14% of your overall grade. And so we still have a lot of points that are remaining for this semester. So hopefully you'll do great on the exam. But if you don't freak out, because there are still opportunities to improve your grade. The exam covers the first half of the semester's material. So that would be topic 1 through 6. And so that is the material you should be looking at and relying upon and pulling upon as you are answering the questions. You have everything that you need to answer these questions. In other words, you don't need to use external resources, and I'd prefer that you did not use external resources, that you can depend on the information from the textbook, from all the articles that we've read, for the course commentary, and also from the lectures. That's the material that I'm expecting you to use for answering these questions. If you take a look at, before you start the exam, make sure that you look at the section on the Canvas site that is information about the midterm exam. There it will tell you information about general expectations for the exam. Oftentimes students ask me, how long should the exam be? What I say is ballpark that the length of the exam should be about 2 typed pages for each question. And so since you're answering 4 questions, that's about 8 double-spaced typed pages. I do recommend that you list the question from the exam on the exam itself, but I won't count those questions that you leave in the exam. That won't count towards your total the total page count for the exam. The page count is the answers to the questions themselves. Now, if your answers are a little bit less than 2 pages each, probably not a problem. If they're a little bit more, that's fine as well. But if your answer is like about a page long, you're probably going to want to go back in and develop your answer. You could get an A with 1 page of answering for an essay question, but it's not likely. So if it comes in short, go back and make sure that you're using information from the textbook and other course resources to support the points that you are making. I'm looking at your ability. I'm looking at whether you can demonstrate that you understand this material. So make sure that you do that. On the flip side, you don't need to tell me everything that you know about American government. Okay. And so if your exam is way too long, then that's something that you're probably going to want to take a look at and make sure that you're really just answering the specific prompts that are in the question. There's no need to go beyond the question itself. The question can, has a specific scope. And so I want you to stay within that scope. Okay, so also there's information on there about citations. And so that, if you're citing something from the textbook, you just say "we the people" and provide a page number. If you're citing something from a lecture or an article, you can use for the article the author's last name and a page number if it's available. And for a lecture, you could just say like topic 5, lecture 1 or something like that. And so do keep in mind that if you use any information that is verbatim from the textbook or articles or the lecture, make sure that you put those in quotation marks and that you properly cite them. If you use material that's verbatim and it's not cited, it's considered plagiarism. And so just keep that in mind. You'll want to put those in quotations. Also, you don't want your quotations to be really long. I'm not assessing your ability to cut and paste relevant material into your exam. You want to, using a short quote is fine, but any other ideas, you're going to want to translate it to your own language. Okay, so that's it. Make sure you look at that portion on the Canvas. Let's switch now. I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at the actual questions for the exam. Okay, so let me X out of there. Yes, I was working on my brackets. I should have made sure that all of that was closed out. Of course, that's going to be money washed down the drain. So, but you got to play. Okay, so this is your exam that you will be answering 4 of the following questions. I want you to make sure that you include the question at the start of each question. That's good because you'll see the prompts there, and then it will also give, when I'm grading it, it's nice to have the question there as well. If you're skipping a question, just delete the question, or you can just leave the answer blank and move on to the next question. And I always tell my students, make sure that when you download this document, you're going to want to save it to your hard drive, to your desktop, or to a zip drive. I've had students who work on the exam, they submit it and it's an empty document. And I'm like, what, where's your exam? And they're like, oh no, I lost some of the material. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so the first question is about the types of governments that you come across in the world today. Very timely given the war in Ukraine. There are many types of government in the world today. I'm asking you, what characteristics do political scientists use to distinguish between the different types of government? What are the defining characteristics of an autocracy, timely, because Russia, an oligarchy, and a democracy? And what are the defining characteristics of a constitutional government, an authoritarian government, and a totalitarian government? So here I'm asking you about different types of government, but also that, the different amounts of power that the governments have over their people in terms of constitutional, authoritarian, and totalitarian. So the United States is defined as a constitutional democracy. Given the characteristics discussed above, the characteristics of a constitutional democracy, do you think the United States satisfies the necessary characteristics of this definition? Is there any place where the US falls short? If so, why? If no, why? Make sure to explain your answers. Now, keep in mind, I'll just put on my little highlighter pen here. Keep in mind that, these kinds of questions are critical thinking questions. So don't throw them away. Take them seriously. They usually, how well you answer that critical thinking piece can really differentiate an A from the rest of the exams. There's no right answer to that. Okay. So you could say, hey, the United States is doing a great job as a constitutional democracy. Support your argument with facts. You could take the other perspective. So there's no right or wrong answer. You'll be graded on for that portion, that critical thinking portion. Obviously, there's a right or wrong answer in terms of the difference between democracy and oligarchy and autocracy. But on these critical thinking questions, you're going to be evaluated on how well you support your argument. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Describe and analyze the conflicts and compromises that occurred during the drafting of the Constitution. What are the main sources of conflict between large and small states? And how did the Great Compromise resolve itself? So we know that there was a lot of discussion and debate at the Constitutional Convention. This question is asking you to describe that. What was the nature of the conflict regarding slavery during the Philadelphia Convention? How did the 3/5 compromise address this conflict? And if the framers, and so here's that critical thinking question, okay? If the framers were able to teleport into the future, to America in 2020, 21, 22 now, how do you think they would evaluate the compromises that were made at this convention? And explain your answer, okay? And so again, there is, sort of like, imagine James Madison, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right? Teleporting to today and looking around at America in 2022, how would James Madison or Alexander Hamilton or Benjamin Franklin, how would they respond to what's going on today? And you can think about the framers and just, broadly as well, like what the concerns of the framers were. The next question is about the separation of powers and federalism. So the separation of powers and federalism are 2 key features of the Constitution. Discuss why the founders chose to include these institutional arrangements in the Constitution and how they function. In your answer, please make sure to define what it means by the separation of powers and federalism, and to describe how each functions within the American system. Okay. And so, you're going to be evaluated here to talk about, those features of the United States Constitution, and also sort of how those features play themselves out within the Constitution. Okay. Question 4 is about the Bill of Rights. And so the question is of the personal liberties guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, which 3 liberties do you think are essential to maintaining a democratic society? In other words, if you could only select 3 liberties, which the government is prohibited from encroaching upon that are in the Bill of Rights, it has to be in the Bill of Rights, which 3 would you choose and why? And on the flip side, which 2 liberties do you think are not as essential to maintaining a democratic society? In other words, which 2 liberties, if you were forced, could be eliminated from the Bill of Rights with little to no impact on democracy? And I know you probably want to say none of them, but you could pick, 2. Make sure to provide a brief explanation of each liberty in your answer, as well as provide well-developed reasons for your choices. A couple of things, there's no right answer. Okay. So you can pick whatever you want, but make a strong case for which are the 3 that are essential and which are the 2 that are not quite as essential. You want to be able to link that to democracy and make sure you choose a liberty, not an entire amendment. So don't tell me the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment, the right having to do with the rights of trial. No, there are many liberties in those amendments. You have to pick 3 liberties, like freedom of speech or the right to counsel, okay, etc. So that's that question. That's a fun question. I like that question. I teach civil liberties. The 5th one has to do with civil rights. Many advances in civil rights have been accomplished through federal legislation. Describe the different parts of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. What have these 2 laws accomplished? And then critical thinking question, how might federal civil rights laws be expanded or changed today in order to address the inequalities that persist? Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here. You're going to be evaluated at how well you're able to sort of summarize, but provide key details. You don't need to tell me everything about the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Summarize, but do provide the key details. Okay. And then also it's asking you about the inequalities that we have today. We just got done doing the discussion on what is owed, the article by Nicole Hannah-Jones, and you could pull upon that. And so how might we change federal civil rights to address inequalities that persist today? So you could look at racial inequalities, gender inequalities, inequalities having to do with sexual orientation and gender identity. It's up to you. Okay. That's that question. And then the 6th question has to do with Congress and representation. There are many different ways the members of Congress can represent the American people. Define and discuss the differences between the 2 main ways, sociological representation and agency representation. Of these 2, which theory do you think comes closest to describing the current way the United States Congress represents the American people? Explain. Of the 2, which comes closest to how you think Congress should represent the American people? Explain your answer. Okay. There's no real right or wrong answers for those. I mean, there is in terms of describing the difference between sociological and agency representation, but particularly when it comes to how you think Congress should represent people, there's no right answer. Just make a good argument about whether you think it's agency and sociological. I think there might be a right answer for like whether it's when we're thinking about Congress today, but I think you could make a good argument for either sociological or agency representation. All right, let me stop the share. Okay, so that's it from me. I tend not to make a lot of video recordings for my collaborative AES class. I mean, I teach at the College of General Studies at UWM just because it is a collaborative program and they have a lot of concerns about accessibility and things like that. But I thought it would be helpful to make a video. And if you're not able to access it, should it come with closed captioning? But if you're having any problems with the accessing of it, just let me know, and I'll help to remedy that for you. All right, I'm around. Call me, text me. I'm you can, we can set up a one-on-one Zoom meeting if you want, but don't hesitate to reach out as you're working on your exam. I'm here to help. I want to see you succeed, and have good luck with your exam. And I look forward to reading them. Talk to you again soon.